So most of the show, I think every interview apart from one, is about discussing major issues with people who I probably don't agree with on most things. But that's freedom of speech and democracy and open expression, which I rather like. Now, John Corvino is an American author and professor of philosophy at Wayne State University. He has contributed to the Gay and Lesbian Review Worldwide, one of my favorites, the Southwest Philosophy Review, and is a columnist for Between the Lines and the online independent gay forum. He joins us from, I think it's Detroit, isn't it?
Indeed.
And how is Detroit in this wonderful weather? Lovelier than ever, I'm sure.
It's not bad.
Let's talk about the marriage issue. How would you define marriage?
How would I define marriage? Well, marriage is a commitment between two people to honor and love and protect each other. I like to define marriage by looking at the vow people undertake when they decide to get married. They say they promise to have and to hold for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, till death do they part. And I think that that's a good initial definition, but of course, marriage is complex and multifaceted, so there's more to say.
Yeah. I have to say, what I find incredibly significant and pertinent is, in that introductory definition, you didn't mention children. For me, the essence of marriage is that it's child-centered.
Well, I want to make something very clear. I think children are a very important reason for marriage. I've always been very clear on that. I say so explicitly in the book. But I don't think that a marriage without children is therefore not a marriage.
But no, that, with respect, is a straw man. No one's arguing that. You could not be able to conceive. You could be very old. You could choose not to have children. That's something different, though. But no one is saying the only definition of a marriage is the capability, the possibility, the probability of having children. But surely the procreative norm is at the very epicenter of what a marriage is. I mean, marriage, two people can love each other. They can live together. They can be siblings, whatever. I mean, there are different forms of relationship, and they're beautiful. But marriage is something different because it's unique in the norm is there will be children. The species will procreate.
Well, I'm not sure how that logic works out. If you grant that it's possible for people to have a marriage without there being children, then it seems like we need to have a definition broad enough to include couples that can't procreate, whether we're talking about same-sex couples or different-sex couples.
No, that's flawed logic. I think you'll find. We don't create law around an exception. We create law around the norm. As I've said, there are marriages where people can't have children. But generally, almost without exception, you'd assume when people get married that at some point there will be children. Why call it a marriage if it's merely two people who love each other? I mean, I will fully admit that people can love each other beyond my understanding. I mean, my wife loves me. I've never quite understood that. But I mean, two gay men or two gay women who love each other, I'm not doubting that for a moment. But why do you think it has to be termed a marriage?
Well, because as you said, there are different kinds of love. There's the kind of love we have with a sibling, there's the kind of love we have with a friend or maybe even a colleague. But the kind of love that we find in marriage is distinctive. That the person that you come home to at night, wake up with in the morning, share your joys and sorrows with, share your bed with. I mean, there's something humanly very important about that kind of love, and I think that's true for gay people as well as for straight people. And I think that marriage is the way we fortify and reinforce that and stand behind it as a society. I mean, the way I see it, there are sort of three fundamental truths on which I base my case. One is that relationships are good for people. Another is that marriage is good for relationships. And the third is that some people are gay. So when you put those things together, you know, there's something to be said for the fact that all of us in society, you know, whether we're gay or straight, aspire to that kind of special relationship, which is different from any other. And I'll grant that to you, that it's different from any other, but not just because many marriages result in children.
Well, it's not many. It's what we expect. It's the assumption of what marriage is for. I mean, marriage did not come out of nowhere. It didn't come out of a moral or religious or political vacuum. The reason for it was, as I mentioned earlier, the procreation of species. But your logic there was very challenging.
I don't think that was the reason for it.
If I may just finish the point. If I may finish the point. Your logic was very challenging there. It seemed to be rather like blue is a colour, thus all colours are blue. You brought three aspects together, and your conclusion was you want gay marriage. Now, let me move beyond this. I mean, there's been four fundamentals to the definition of marriage throughout history, I would argue, and they have been number. There have been exceptions, but one and one. Polygamy did exist in Islam and Sephardic Judaism for a while, but it was generally one and one.
Actually, polygamy is the most common form of marriage historically.
I've got to finish the four, sir. It's one of those things where the non-gay guy gets to fight back. I know it can be very challenging to people today, but it's going to happen.
It's your show.
And yes, it is. And then we have blood, not too closely related. We have gender, man and woman, and we have age, over the age of consent, which does vary. But let me ask you this. I think what we'll have in Canada before very long is a challenge on polygamy. And it'll be very anglicized, highly educated Muslim women, hijab-wearing PhDs, who will go to court and say, how dare you accuse us of being vulnerable and victims of misogyny? We believe in polygamy. Now, in that we've redefined marriage to include same gender, would you accept polygamy?
I don't think that that follows, not at all. I mean, first of all, I think we should point out that polygamy is the most common form of marriage historically. Even Maggie Gallagher concedes that in our book together. So trying to pin this on the same-sex marriage issue, I think, is unfair and myopic with respect to history.
When have I done?
Well, you said that if I allow marriage for same-sex couples, then why not polygamy? And I think the gender of the partners and the number of the partners are two different things.
What always happens when it comes to the marriage issue is people are bullied. I'm making extremely calm, cogent arguments.
I'm bullying you?
I'm telling you what generally happens, and you're not responding. I don't care what Maggie Gallagher says. I would question her history and her analysis of polygamy, and I don't think what you mean by polygamy is probably what I mean. All I'm asking you is, forget the gay issue. Yes. Do you think that there is a consistent legal, moral argument now against polygamy?
I do, although it's not my issue.
Well, what would it be?
Well, what we found historically is that polygamy tends to be polygyny, one man, several wives.
Of course.
That tends to promote sexism in society. It also tends to promote serious class differences where we have high-status males with multiple wives, and then we have lower-status males who become somewhat unmarriageable. And I think that as a matter of social policy, that's a bad thing. But again, I didn't come on here to talk about polygamy. It's not my issue.
I'm afraid that radical changes in society have consequences, and I think what you just said about polygamy is a bit of a misunderstanding of Middle Eastern culture. But in history, we have never consciously created units where there cannot be both a male and female role model. Now, we have broken families, marriage is in a desperate state right now. I blame, by the way, straight people for beginning the decay of marriage. I don't blame gay people at all. I don't even blame them for trying to have gay marriage. But for the first time in human history, we are consciously creating units where there will not be a male or a female role model. Is that desirable for young people?
Well, I think, first of all, you're confusing the issue of marriage with the issue of parenting and families. Now, I grant that they go together, but as I said earlier, people are allowed to get married even if they don't intend to have children, even if they cannot have children. And what I was saying earlier about, you said that the point historically of marriage has been procreation. Actually, I think the history of marriage is much more complicated than that. I think that marriage has had a lot to do throughout history with the protection of property, the passing down of property through families. I don't deny that procreation and protecting children. Let me be very clear on this. I do not deny that the protection of children is a very important part of marriage. But I'll also point out that there are same-sex couples who have children, sometimes from previous relationships, sometimes from adoption and so on, and their children are important too. And one of the reasons I support marriage for same-sex couples is because of the stability that it would promote for those children.
Yeah, there's no evidence that it does. In fact, there's increasing evidence when it's allowed to be published. There's a lot of instability. And this idea that it's all about property protection, it really is week one gender studies. It doesn't.
I didn't say it's all about property protection. I said that that's an important part of the history of marriage. You make it sound like the one man, one woman nuclear ideal of family that we've known in the last 50 or so years.
You're belittling me, sir. You don't know me, sir, and you're belittling a highly intelligent argument. You're giving me stuff that my kids got when they were 18 in their first year at university about property. That's an urban myth that was debunked many years ago, both at Cambridge and at Princeton. Anyway, we're out of time. I thank you for your time. You're willing to come on, which is quite something. Appreciate it. You take care. Thank you.
Thank you.